Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Nice to see you all again. Let's start as usual with our meditation for 5 minutes. Being sure to set up your posture first, checking to make sure your back is straight, and then uh, refreshing your motivation, and then spending some time calming your mind by focusing. Okay. Good morning again. And just a quick reminder, if you didn't hear yesterday, after this class, is over, after that hour and a half is over, then we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to start again and do a 1-hour question and answer session about anything. So you're welcome to stay on if you'd like to do some question and answer. Okay, so let's do a little review from yesterday. So yesterday we talked about shamatha and some of the antidotes to problems we can have when we're developing our focus, developing our calm abiding. And if we have a lot of excitation, a lot of distraction, thoughts pulling us away, or if we seem to have difficulty ignoring like sounds in our environment, then one of the things we can do is loosen our focus. So not be so intent, that just sort of hold our focus a little bit more lightly. And it sounds contrary. It seems like when we're being pulled away that we should clamp down, but that isn't actually what works best. What works best is sort of, relaxing. It's like when I talk about, training the mind is like training a puppy, and you have to very firmly but very gently, consistently bring it back. So if you hold too tightly and try to force it to do something, then it wriggles all over and it tries to get away. And that's kind of what our mind does. So lowering the chin is another one. If we're distracted, closing the eyes a little bit more, thinking of a serious topic, sort of like, giving yourself sort of a, admonition to get serious, get back on this, use your energy because you don't have a lot of time. And then if you do get distracted, first thing you do is that you relax and you let it go. You release the thought, you release whatever has pulled you away, and then you return. And then if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're having spacing out too much, or you're falling asleep pretty easily, then tightening your focus, being more intent is going to work better. Open your eyes a little bit. Can help bringing more light in, lifting your chin, raising this breastbone so your shoulders go back, so you're more attentive. Imagining a bright light white light in your mind, or an inspiring topic like Buddha nature, bodhicitta. And then if you do lose the object because it sort of drifts away and you just aren't paying attention, then you can refresh your interest in the object, become more intent about it, and then restore that focus and then retain it. And if it's really bad, you might need to take a break. Okay, so then let's review attachment. From yesterday, we talked about attachment being similar to anger, but on the opposite spectrum, in that it exaggerates the positive aspects. Okay, so it sees things as much more desirable than they actually are, and as the source of our lasting happiness. And like we said in the perception diagram, we tend to put the source of our happiness wholly onto the object. And when we put it over, completely onto something that is external, then we want it, right? And we want to hold on to it. And we feel like we have to hold very tightly to that thing in order to continue to be happy, because that is the source of our happiness, instead of seeing how much the mind participates in that. So it grasps or clings to the object or the person. And then the antidotes to attachment are thinking about the impermanence of an object, so the fact that it is constantly changing, and so are we. Practicing letting go of things. One of the ways in which we know that we are attached to something is if we imagine it being taken away from us, or imagine it no longer being there. Then how do we feel? How strong is our feeling
of loss? How, how intense is it? And do we get angry is another one, because sometimes when we, when we really like things and we want things and then someone says we can't have them, we get really angry. That's usually an indication that we're pretty attached to it, that we think it is the source of our happiness. And then we can practice gratitude for what we already have so much, and contentment, being happy with what we have and who we are right now. And that doesn't mean that we don't continue to aspire, okay, to be better people. I think we can be content with who we are and also see that we can be better. And I think it's a difference between like aspirations and expectations. When we have these really strong expectations of ourselves, then it's very hard to be content. And we tend to, blame and, speak unkindly to ourselves. So the more that we can be content, actually, the happier we are. So some other antidotes. Think about the disadvantages of being attached. So the amount of worry and frustration and anxiety it creates, trying to hold on to the object. Also, when we lose the thing, which is inevitably going to happen because of impermanence, um, everything that comes together eventually goes apart, right? So if we continue to be attached to things, one of the disadvantages of that is that when they do inevitably change, we suffer. We get overwhelmed with a lot of suffering. Sometimes when people retire and their whole identity has been really caught up in their work, because they were attached to their work, or they were attached to the person who was this kind of worker, then they can get very, despondent and very, overwhelmed with sadness and loss when they retire. And yet, who we are, we're going to talk about that today. This idea of what is a self is so much more than just what we do. And if we get really attached to that identity of being a worker, that can, when it's taken away from us, can be really difficult. So remembering the negative aspects of whatever we feel is a desirable person, object, or situation, and then recognizing how our mind creates the experience of obsessive desire. And when we recognize how the mind creates the experience, we have a lot more control over whether we're going to experience the obsessive desire or not. We don't necessarily have control over the objects, but we definitely can start to work with our mind and make our mind flexible and start to see that maybe this thing isn't the source of my ultimate happiness, and that actually I can be happy with something different that is not this specific situation or this specific person. Okay. All right. So let me. So I want to do a little bit of review from the last class when we were talking about this idea of dependent arising and emptiness. So we are under the influence of the belief that things exist in the way that they appear. And one of the ways in which they appear to us, same thing as that perception diagram that I showed you, one of the ways in which they appear to us as if they exist independently, independently of our minds and independently of everything else around them. And as a result of that, that ignorance and that belief, we create these misapprehensions and these negative afflictive emotions that then create harm. We end up harming others, which creates negative karma, and we end up creating suffering for ourselves. Not only do we suffer simply feeling the negative emotion, but we also then create the habit of thinking in that way, and we do actions that bring suffering experiences to ourselves. So if we can knock out the ignorance with wisdom, with this opposite point of view, then we are less likely to develop that view of things as independent, as externally existent. So one of the main ways of thinking, so logic or reasonings, to see that the things are not don't exist independently, is when we analyze their causes and conditions. Okay, where do they come from? So we can look like, let's say, this piece of paper. Okay, so this is a piece of paper. Let's pretend like it's separate. I don't want to tear it out right now, but it's separate from this notebook. Okay, so we can see, or even the pen. Let's do the pen. Okay, so here's a pen. And when I hold this pen, it seems like an independent thing, doesn't it? Like it's one pen. Even our language, this is a pen. It's not a book. It's not anything else. But when we start looking more deeply into what goes into the making of a pen, we can start to see, the plastic that had to be developed, the lab that made the plastic, it had to be formed in a certain way. There's some metal in here that had to be mined. There's ink in there that had to be created. There had to have been the idea of the pen in the first place. Somebody had to have, sold it, right? Even had the idea of marketing a pen and making them on a mass production, right? Someone had to operate the machinery that made the pen. And then we can start talking about all the parents of all those people who were involved in the pen. And we can get bigger and bigger and bigger and see that this little single thing is actually not single. It's actually the combination of a whole bunch of things, okay? Which is its dependent arising. The fact that it is dependent on other things in order to arise. So this idea that it is a single independent pen in the way that it appears, the fact that it is not that way, is its emptiness. Its emptiness of appearing in the way that it exists, okay? So we have such a habit of independent, intrinsic existence of things that it's very difficult to see things in any other way. So let's look at some of the definitions of emptiness and dependent arising. So nothing actually exists independently. Everything is dependent on something else. And because things exist dependently, they have no absolute reality or inherent existence on their own. And so this, we start to talk about what is truth. Okay, if there is no independent absolute existence of anything, whether it's a situation or a person or a thing, then where is truth, right? Where is the true thing? And we start to see, when we analyze how things exist as dependently, we see that mind is one of the causes of existent things. Okay. So because things are empty of existing in the way that they appear. Okay, so this is very hard to see because we have never known things to be different in any other way than as in existing independently. So one of the parts of this that is very difficult is the fact that many of us who were trained with this modern scientific kind of education have a view that the only thing that is real, the only thing we can ever know, is what we can see with our senses. Okay, in terms of what we can see, what we can hear, what we can taste. And within Buddhism, what we're starting to do is we're starting to say, well, in fact, you can know things to be real with your intelligence, with your reasoning, even if you don't see them exactly the way they are. Now, this is true in science as well. Like many of us, like many scientists have never seen a black hole, okay? Because you can't see a black hole, because a black hole there's no light, right? And it's actually reasoning from the effects of things like gravity around the black hole and the effects on stars and other, you know, heavenly bodies around a black hole, that then we deduce, we reason that there is this phenomena called a black hole. Okay, so this is similar to emptiness, this idea that even though everything appears absolutely independently, it does not exist that way because we start to analyze it. Okay, so when we recognize that things are empty, they become less solid. They become more like an illusion or a dream. You can see how this pen starts to break up. We start to see within the pen all these people and all these, you know, other, you know, elements of the earth, you know, that go into making this pen. So then where is the real pen? You know, it starts to be like, well, it's sort of here, but it's also many, many other things. So this idea of the pen becomes more like something that I have made up, that I have put together with my mind, which is more similar to an illusion or a dream. And because the mind participates in our reality, as we change our mind, we change our reality. And it's not that we change it, you know, like I just sit here and think, oh, this isn't a pen, this isn't a pen anymore. It's not like that. It's that as we start to see that situations and you know, and even things can have alternate functions, that things can exist in a different way, it starts to help us, you know, have different perspective. You know, now I can see this pen as something other than a pen. You know, now it becomes a pointer, right? And this, you know, it's very simple when we talk about a pen, but when we talk about other situations where our minds can get so stuck on seeing things a certain way, when we start to shift things, it actually shifts how we interact with them, which then it shifts how they exist. Okay. So we talk about, when we talk about emptiness, we talk about two truths, okay? So we have a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. So a conventional truth is when we don't analyze very deeply, okay? So without using our reasoning, with only going into, you know, what I see, what I feel, what I use, this is a cup, okay? And it appears independently. On a conventional level, it exists as a cup. Now, ultimate truth is when I start to analyze and go deeper into how the cup exists. Okay, that's its ultimate existence. Now, when we have ultimate truth and conventional truth, we can't really separate the two. Okay, because, and we can't say that one is more important than the other, that somehow the ultimate truth is more the existence of this cup than its conventional existence, because we couldn't have the ultimate truth if we didn't have the conventional existence. I couldn't even see the emptiness of the cup if there was no cup here. Okay? So on a conventional level, there has to be a cup. And then I start to analyze and I see that the cup has another aspect to it. It has its ultimate truth. It has its existence as not independent, as a dependent arising. So seeing those two things together at the same time is very difficult, in the sense that only an enlightened being can see those things at the same time. So for us, we have to go back and forth for a while. We can see it how it appears to me. It's a cup. I can use it. I can drink out of it. It's right there. And then I can analyze it. I can go deeper into its ultimate level. Okay. So sometimes what happens when we start doing this analysis of the ultimate existence of things, we can fall into this nihilism. Okay, so nihilism is this idea that things don't exist. Okay, so if I start analyzing the pen really carefully and I start to see it's all these different things, then the pen starts to disappear in some ways. And if I start to see the world as empty of existing the way it appears, like an illusion, like a dream, and then I think that cause and effect doesn't work anymore, then I can get into this non-ethical way of behaving. This belief, well, there are no results of my actions, so I am not subject to anything because nothing exists anyway, okay? And this is one extreme. The other extreme is the one that we're really used to, that things are absolute, that things have intrinsic existence, that they are independent, that they exist under their own power from their own side, that my mind doesn't participate in them at all. When in fact, the reality of how things exist is somewhere in between, in this big green triangle, is the actual existence of things. But we can't talk, we can talk around it, but we can't say exactly what it is because language is dualistic. Language is either things don't exist or things exist absolutely. And so when we are trying to get to an actual experience of how things exist, we have to go in between those two to something that is beyond words. Okay, so an experience of the emptiness of something is something that is beyond words. It's not nothing and it's not absolute, you know, intrinsically, inherently something. It is between those two. Okay, that's why it's conventional truth and its ultimate truth. It's somewhere, its actual existence is somewhere between the two. Okay, so when we're talking about a self, okay, so my identity, what I do with myself is that I do the same thing as I do with the pen, okay? I make it concrete. I make it absolute, okay? I take one or two characteristics and I make it into a me that is unchanging, that is independent from everything, that is only this one thing, okay? And that becomes a problem. And that's actually our biggest problem is when we start to see this self as only existing in one certain way, when actually it is so much more. It is so much broader than that. And so much, you know, it has so much potential as a result. But when we get stuck, you know, in this view that I am like this, and this is the way I am, and I'm never going to change, and I'm, you know, I'm my past mistakes, and now I'm a bad person, or I'm an incompetent person, or something like this, and we hold on to this view, and it's like a rock, right? This identity. Okay, so what I would like you to do, let's do some breakout groups. So it looks like we can do, let's do 3 people in a group, so that's about maybe 30 groups, I think 30 groups, and answer the question, what is a self for you? How do you see what, you know, what a self is, okay? So it's not what is yourself, but it is in some ways, but don't go into I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, but what is a self? When we start defining it, what do you see a self is, okay? So go ahead and Felipe, please divide everyone into groups and then come back and we'll talk about more about what selflessness is.
All right, I'm unmuting everyone.
Hello, Yong?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Lucia, are you here? Maybe not yet. Can you start your video, or is your connection not good enough, Yong?
I think I can start a video. Just wait for a while.
Oh, good. Good.
Hi.
Hi. Where are you?
I'm from Malaysia.
Oh, are you there now?
I am here in my house.
Oh, how wonderful. Cool. So do you have an idea about the answer to this question of what is a self?
Sorry, I have to say that I just joined the meeting just 5 minutes ago, but I just encountered something with my dad. Like we have a fight just now. So I'm just thinking, I don't know. I just have some feeling that I thought that I could control my emotion when I talk to him, but I have this anger in me now, which I find quite relevant to this question now. uh,
Yes.
yeah, I feel that it's not just self. Is I don't know. I don't feel that it's just me myself now. I feel so much connected with my dad. Also, I can feel his anger. So I don't know. I feel that the self should not be just, maybe it's not just one unit, just me, but it's also uh, somebody else too.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's, yeah, because I think our relationships very much just define who we are.
Right.
So yeah, because do you see a lot of your dad's characteristics in you?
Uh, I cannot deny that. But I also had a conversation with my friend. Like, in fact, I joined the introduction to Buddhism course in Tushita 2 years ago. And
Oh,
in the course, I was told that we are all individual. It shouldn't have so much relation with the parents and family members. But I do in such situation. I really feel that a lot of things. Um, I don't know whether it's inheritance or, but it's kind of like I learned a lot from him, although we did
mm,
not talk a lot.
mm,
But I think from the daily uh, interaction, we see each other so often. We learn a lot from them. But at the
mm,
same time, I feel that a lot of things I learned from when I get to be adult. I spent 10 years without him, so I also
mm,
learned a lot from these 10 years.
mm,
I feel that I have a lot to teach him. It's not like teaching him, but to show him sometimes it shouldn't. We don't have to behave that way. We don't have to put out our anger. Um, yeah, sorry.
yeah. No, no, I like hearing it. I think it's interesting. So then a self become, oh, hi, Lucia. Hello? Can you hear us? Can you hear us? I see you. Hi. Oh, you can't hear us? Oh, no, you can't, I can't hear you. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, something in your audio. Well, oh, sorry. Um, yeah, in my culture, and I wonder if there isn't a difference in cultures, is that in my culture, we're really encouraged to be independent from our parents. And so I know that, my personality is very much influenced by my family, how I was raised, and I've examined even, some of my mom's problems that I took on, that I have the same problems. Um, so yeah, this idea of a self then becomes there, that there is no such thing as just me. That's what I think. There's no just me. But at the same time, there is a me, because I do make decisions and I do, act independently. And yeah, so it's hard to find like what is me and what is not me. It's like, I am not sure about that. And yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. I'm done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So from that, and because I say I all the time, right? And I I actually, one of the things that is most, was really powerful for me, yesterday we did attachment, and I started to see that the reason why I'm attached to teaching is that it reinforces my sense of me as a teacher, and that becomes who I am, you know, a teacher. I don't know if you have any, like, are you really, you know, connected to being a man, or connected to being Malaysian, or, you know, something like that. I've gotten better at not being so identified with being an American, because I know Americans can be really, you know, like, we're the best in the world kind of attitude. And the more because I live in India now, so living in India has really helped me, to see that, you know, there's so many other cultures, and so many other ways to be. Yeah. So I like that, because then you know, that idea of being me, is that I am an American, starts to be like not so important. Yeah. Yeah, that in between place, between, there's a me, but then at the same time, that me is so many other things, that there's not a me. So where's that in between place? Well, I'm glad you're here. I think it's awesome that you decided to join. This is your first day of these online classes.
You know, this is my second day.
Second day. So you started yesterday.
I know I started 3 days ago, but I stopped 2 days. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Don't care. Whatever. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'm glad. And you did the course 2 years ago. Who was your teacher 2 years ago?
I'm sorry, I couldn't remember the name, but it's he's Australian.
Oh, okay. Venerable Namgyal, maybe?
So it's very tall guy.
Glenn Svensson? Glenn?
Sorry,
He's pretty tall. Was he a monk or not? Oh,
He is a monk.
oh, so I think it probably Venerable Namgyal, but it's hard to tell. 2 years ago, we have lots of teachers coming through. Okay, I'm going to go back to the main session. It was very nice meeting you and talking with you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Yes.
I have to
Sorry,
tell you.
Luchi. Yeah.
I just want to tell you that I'm so grateful that I just get to talk to you, because it just came at the right time. I got this
Yeah.
emotion release out. I'm so happy. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Lucia, sorry it didn't work out. It must be something with your microphone. Yeah, you'll have to test your microphone. Okay, I'm going to return. See you. Okay, it looks like we're pretty much back. So let's get started again. So I want to talk a bit about selflessness. So like I said before, the Tibetans were very good at systematizing. Oh, first I have a really nice quote. Let's do this quote first. This is from Pema Chodron, who is an American nun who's been studying for 40 or some years. And she says, As human beings, we are as impermanent as everything else is. Every cell in the body is continuously changing. Thoughts and emotions rise and fall away unceasingly. When we're thinking that we're competent or that we're hopeless, what are we basing it on? On this fleeting moment? On yesterday's success or failure? We cling to a fixed idea of who we are and it cripples us. Nothing and no one is fixed. So I'm going to read that one again. So you read too, because it's really good. It's a good one. As human beings, we are as impermanent as everything else is. Every cell in the body is continuously changing. Thoughts and emotions rise and fall away unceasingly. When we're thinking that we're competent or that we're hopeless, what are we basing it on? On this fleeting moment? On yesterday's success or failure? What we do, we cling to a fixed idea of who we are and it cripples us. Nothing and no one is fixed. Okay. Oh, do I want to go into this? I have 5 minutes. Well, let's do it. Let's try it. Okay. So, selflessness. So, like I was saying, the Tibetans were very good at systematizing these concepts. Okay, so they took like all the debating that was done by the Indian scholars and they put it in a graduated system when we're starting to do analysis on what is the self. Okay, so the most obvious or more obvious would be a concept of a self that is permanent, somehow eternal, and unchanging, as well as unitary, like not having parts, that there is somehow that there is a me somewhere in here that is a single thing that is not made up of parts and that is independent of causes and conditions, that is not dependent on, for example, my parents, or not dependent on God, a creator God, or that's not a good example. Not dependent on the body and mind, that this body and mind can exist and there's a self that somehow is like totally separate from it. And so this is very similar to the concept, some people's concept of a soul. Okay, so this idea that a soul existed before I did, but it is me at the same time, and that when my body and mind go away, there will still be my soul, and that even that soul is independent of this body and mind. So we have to look at this. Usually this more obvious way of seeing the self is one that is taught in philosophical or religious systems. It's not one that we necessarily feel innately, is the way we are, okay? For most of us, it's something that we have acquired, this idea of a soul, okay? And it's most obvious in the sense that somehow it is completely separate from the me, from the body and mind, but is still me. Okay, so that's one way. So we have to then debate that and look at that and say, well, no, the self couldn't exist like that. For one thing, I believe that this me is dependent on my body and mind, that what I think influences myself, that like having the gender of being a woman is part of me. So how can you say that the actual me is somehow independent of my body and mind? Okay, but you have to look at what you think of as what is meant by a soul. Okay, so a more subtle way of looking at I'm going to look at you so you can see me too. Okay, a more subtle way of looking at this idea of a self is something called self-sufficient and therefore substantially existent. And this is the self that is somehow, we have an image, okay? We have a belief that like somewhere behind our eyes or in our heart somewhere, there is a self, there is a me, okay, that has some kind of substantial existence, but at the same time, it can exist separately from my body and mind, okay, from this body and mind. And the reason why we often, this is much more innate, okay, this is more like we sort of naturally feel like this is how the self exists, okay? So for example, when I say my body, okay, in order for there to be a my body, there has to be a self that somehow controls or owns the body. Or when we say my mind, we have this sense that there is a self that exists that is somehow separate from the body and mind, but is interdependent with it in order to control it. So then when we get into a situation, let's say where someone, like I used with anger, someone walks in here and they start insulting, you know, they start saying insulting words, you know, and attacking me with their words, okay? So then who actually is hurt? Okay, that's what we have to look at. Who is hurt when someone attacks me with words verbally? Now, first of all, are they just hurting the body? So no, you know, like the sound waves are coming in my ears, right? But that's not really hurting my ears, unless they get really loud, but still. Usually it takes a lot for them to hurt me physically, right? So what do we think? Are they hurting my mind? So then we have to look at what a mind is. So a mind is thoughts, it's feelings, it's memories, it's lots of things, but it's pretty non-physical, right? We've talked about this, it's ethereal. So are they really hurting my mind? Don't I have the sense that they are hurting me, right? That there's a self somewhere behind my eyes or in my heart that they are hurting. They're hurting this self. They're not hurting my mind. We sometimes say that they're hurting my feelings, but really, can someone hurt your feelings? If your feelings are an internal experience that you have, can someone actually hurt them? Okay, no, right? There's something that you're experiencing as a result of conditions that have arisen. Okay, so but we do have this sense of a self that exists that is somehow owning the body or owning the mind, but is separate from it. And that's this idea of a self-sufficient, somehow able to exist without a body and mind. And that's what is hurt. Okay, so when we start to challenge this one, so Buddhists say even that self doesn't exist. Okay, that self doesn't exist either, because if that self, that independent me, you know, that somehow owns or controls the body existed, then we should be able to know it without the body and mind being present. Okay, it should be able to exist without a body and mind. But the fact is that you cannot think of yourself without a body and mind, without thinking of a body and thinking of a mind, because that's what a self is. Okay, so somehow seeing it as substantially separate, having some substantial existence separate from this body and mind, is an illusion. Okay, what we do is we take all these, you know, these experiences that we have, and we label it me. Okay, and I'm not just a label. Okay, I am a label combined with the body and mind. Okay, so then the third one, and don't expect to get this, you know, completely clearly with my 5-minute explanation, because you're not going to do it. Okay, a really good book to follow up on this is written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and it's called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Okay, so the most subtle type of self that we believe exists is one that is somehow inherently existent in our body or in our mind. Okay, and so we think that, well, I am my mind, right? I am my body. Okay, so it's not that there's some separate self that exists in, but actually my body and mind is who I am. Okay, so then if that is true, then they say we should be able to find a self as we experience it, you know, as somehow a concrete, independent, self-existent kind of entity. We should be able to find it in the body or in the mind. Okay, so if we say myself is my mind, then why wouldn't we just say my mind is my mind? Why do we have to have another word and have somehow a different experience that myself is in my mind or myself is my mind? Because in general, we don't say that a self and a mind are the same thing, do we? Okay, we often give this word self more actual reality than it actually has. Okay. All right, so that's the inherent existence. So the proof against that is that, well, if if somehow you have an experience of a self that is the mind, then you should be able to find the self in the mind. So then we do an analysis to try to find it. Okay. So let's look at this meditation that we do, and we're going to do this today. So this is called the 4-point analysis. Okay, so the first thing we have to do when we're meditating on the self, so just like the cup, when we talked about cup, okay, remember we said in order for the cup to exist somehow as separate from my mind, I have to be able to find something in the cup that says, I am a cup, right? If it were only, if it had existence under its own power, independent of my mind, then there should be something from the side of the cup that says, I am a cup. Okay, but then when we start to look, we start to take it apart and look at its parts, we cannot find anything that is cupness in the parts. Okay, it's not in the handle, it's not in the outside, it's not in the bottom, it's not in the space, okay, because that's just space. It's not even in the function, okay, because the function is in my mind, okay, that labels it a cup. So we have a cup is a dependent arising of the label, my mind, on the object, okay? So we do the same thing with the self, okay? A self is a label on all this body and mind. And we take that label self, we take that me or that I, and we give it more existence, we give it more concreteness, we make it more absolute, we give it under its own power, that it somehow exists independently. Okay, so our object of negation is our experience of that concreteness. Okay, and this most often happens again when we're triggered in some way, when someone insults us, when someone blames us for something we didn't do, when someone rejects us, because they're not rejecting our body and mind, they're rejecting me. Okay, this sense of self that is very powerful. So we have to bring up this sense of self, this me that I believe that exists somehow beyond my body and mind. Okay, the second step is that we have to agree on the reasoning. Okay, so the reasoning is, if that kind of self that exists from its own side were to exist, I would have to be able to find it somewhere in my meditation. I could, it has to exist somewhere. If it is there as a real thing, then I should be able to find it. Okay, so the reasoning is that, let's take the example of a cow. Okay, so let's say I own a cow. Okay, so the reasoning is, if my cow exists, it has to be either in the barn, outside of the barn, or somewhere else, right? So if it isn't in the barn and it isn't outside the barn, like on the farm, okay, and it's nowhere else, then that cow doesn't exist, okay, right? I mean, pretty obvious, okay? So the same thing with the self. If this sense of an absolute self that exists separate from my body and mind exists, then it has to be either in the body, it has to be in the mind, or it has to be somewhere else. And if it's not in one of those three places, then it doesn't exist. Okay, so we have to agree that that is true. And then in the meditation, we start looking for it. Okay, we look for it in the body, we look for it in the mind, and then we reason, could it really be somewhere else, but yet still be me? Could there be a self that exists like somewhere in the universe, but I can't find it in my body and mind, but it is still myself? Okay, doesn't make a lot of sense, because then how could it be me? Right? How could I interact with it, or how could I have a sense of it if it isn't even here? Okay, here, even in this mental sense of it's not in my mind, but it exists somewhere. Okay, so that's that. We have to challenge that, right? Question that. Okay, so what we find is, actually, as you go through these 4 steps, you start to find that you cannot find the self. You cannot find a me that exists somehow. That experience of a me as existing concretely or inherently doesn't exist. So in my discussion just now, I had a great discussion with one of you, and we were talking about the fact that, well, me is also, you know, my interactions, my relationships, like with my parents. Okay, they very much influence this idea of who I am. So then where does me start and all my experiences and relationships end? You know, where is the me that is somehow here and all my relationships are here, if who I am is very much a part of all those relationships I've ever had? So again, it starts to break up based on this causes and conditions. Okay, you start to see that there isn't a self that exists. Now remember, going back to conventional and ultimate truth, is there a cup here? Yes, there's a cup. Conventionally, there has to be a cup, just like a self. There has to be a self. But how the self exists, when we start to analyze its ultimate truth, is that it doesn't exist in the way that we believe it does, almost to the extent that it doesn't exist at all. Okay, so this is something you get to meditate on. Okay, so we can do some questions now. If people have questions, we can talk about that.
Okay, I'm started with Shagun. You're unmuted. You can ask your question now.
Thank you. Hi, Venerable. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
It's good to see you. I met you in February. It's so good to see you again.
You too.
So, I have a question on emptiness. I'm looking for some examples, some use cases, how I can use it in my real life, and particularly at my workplace. Because if I think too much about it, it kind of, shakes everything up, and it's like, why am I even doing it? Because if I think about it, it's like, all these things I have labeled it, or society has labeled it, success, and the status or the money. It all comes like that. It is all being labeled either by me or my society. So it kind of shakes everything, and then I'm in my, probably I go too nihilistic, and thinking that we really need to do this or not. So maybe some examples, and a kind of a middle way where we can take this, use it in our daily life, and also keep moving forward as well.
Okay. Okay. So One thing I find is that when we have defined money and career as success, and that this becomes the main motivation for our lives, that these things do become absolute and concretely the only definition of success. And so then we have to look at that concept of success and see, okay, when I'm analyzing the concept of success, success is also a dependent arising in the sense of it is how I label it and how society labels it. So I can start to see the emptiness of this concept of success in the sense that it appears the way I was taught it as a concept. This definition, my definition of success is, making a certain amount of money, having a certain status in my job. Okay. Now I can define success in many different ways. I can define success in terms of how much do I help other people in my life? How much am I a kind person? How much am I expressing my values of, honesty and contentment and right speech and all those kinds of things? And I define my success in that way. So that's one way that you can start to analyze this concept of success and see that it is also a dependent arising and is not absolutely dependent on somebody else's definition of it.
The one problem which happens is because our work is so individualistic, right? My promotions and sometimes I try this, I go to work and I just think, no, today I'm going to go with the motivation of bodhicitta that, how much I can just work in the sense I can give to my customers back rather than just, the other way around.
Right.
Probably have not been very successful at that because the whole, the environment is individualistic, right? How much you're
Yes.
able to sell and, your
Yes.
promotions. So it looks so contradictory sometimes because the
Yes.
whole environment is like that, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you have to use your wisdom, of course, because it is, those are aspects of your workplace that in order to continue to benefit others, to even serve your customers, you also have to be successful in some ways. It's successful in the sense of, making a profit and, pleasing your managers and, that sort of thing. So you can, it's not that, compassion throws out this idea of wisdom. Okay. And I think that it can be integrated. Sometimes it has to be balanced. I think what you're saying from an individualistic point of view is that you have to take care of yourself at the same time as you're taking care of others. And what we start to do is that taking care of yourself becomes so that you can benefit others. So that you can continue to serve your customers, you have to maintain a certain status in your workplace. And sometimes what that means is that, you have to set aside maybe the needs of your customers for a short time in order to continue to maintain your place in your workplace so that you can continue in the long run to serve your customers. So this is skillful. It's definitely skillful, and it takes knowing, what your workplace is and what is required in your workplace. And you can bring them together. I guess that's what I'm saying, that you can bring them together. And I know that it's difficult. The other thing that is that there may not be like-minded people in your company who are also feeling and thinking the same way. And sometimes you have to, and you can't necessarily teach them to be different, right? You can only be different within yourself as much as you can, and balancing that. And then actually you are happier. They start to see you are happier, and then they start to want to be like you. So but it's slow. It's really a slow process. And I know it's very competitive and that sort of thing. But I think it can be done. I've had students who have come through who have balanced this. So you're an intelligent person, I'm sure, and you can balance it too.
Thank you, Venerable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, another one?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Sai.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Hello, Venerable. Thank you very much for the teachings every night. I'm really enjoying this course.
Good.
Yeah, my question is more of a technical question. I would like to know more about the difference between an independent self and a self-sufficient self. Like, I don't understand the difference between those two.
Okay. So when we talk about independent in terms of the first level, we're talking about independent of all causes and conditions, including a body and mind. So not even created as a result of causes and conditions. So somehow always existing, okay? Not and permanent, unchanging, okay? So when we're talking about the second level, the self-sufficient, we do talk about it being interdependent with the body and mind, okay? So it is affected by a body and mind, and it is still the product of causes and conditions. But somehow it also has some kind of an existence that is separate from the body and mind, even though it is interdependent with it, okay? It also, the image they usually use is that the self-sufficient self is like a man, and the body and mind are like the sack that it's carrying on his back. Okay, that's the image that they usually use when they're talking about it. And an independent self would somehow be, be a man that is totally over here, and a body and mind that is totally over here, completely separate. Yeah.
But still, the self-sufficient self would have like something that not changes, like it would be somehow permanent, or it would have like characteristics that don't change, or no, or not.
No, it could still change. It could still change. It's more the difference is that it has some kind of a substance that, and I don't know what, whether it's physical or non-physical, but it somehow has a substance, it has an existence, it has a reality that is also, even though it's interdependent with the body and mind, and even though it is changing, it still can exist separately from the body and mind.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I guess I just have to think about it.
Yeah,
Think
keep
it
working
through.
on. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Maybe we go to meditation now, since we're going to have lots of time for questions afterwards.
Yep, let's move on to it.
Okay.
All right, so everyone please go back to a comfortable posture. Set up your position and especially maintain a back which is loosely upright. And take a moment just to let your body become grounded and stable in that posture. Get a sense of feeling comfortable. And allow the bell to bring you into the space of the body first. As we've done so many times now, take a moment to bring the body back to its natural state by releasing all tension, staying motionless and alert. So letting go of all tension, all tightness in the body, and also letting go of all worries and concerns in the mind, trying to cultivate a state of calmness, of serenity, which allows you to focus your mind to make it more pliable to use for meditation. And now for just a moment, bring your attention to the breath, wherever it manifests in the body. To the best of your ability, trying to get a sense of the physical sensations that manifest related to the breath. And now that you've calmed down and become more focused, we can start to analyze. So check if you have a sense that there is a me right here, right now, in this room trying to meditate. A me who is trying to focus on the breath. Check to see if you have a sense of this me existing from its own side, so solid, so independent. It doesn't seem to depend upon anything else to exist. Do you have that experience? If you ask yourself, what am I doing? And you might answer, I am meditating. And this I seems to be so solid, so independent. So let us investigate if this me meditating can be actually found somewhere. Is the me meditating anywhere in the body? Maybe in your head, behind your eyes? Is it the brain? Is our brain the me that is meditating? Or the brain is simply something which I, the meditator, am using? Or perhaps this me meditating is in some other part of the body. Try to see if you can pinpoint, if you can definitely find this me meditating. Maybe in your chest, the abdomen, your arms, your legs. Is it anywhere in the body? And if you weren't able to find this me meditating in a particular point of the body, perhaps you have a sense that the body itself as a whole is the me which is meditating. But isn't the body something which I am using for the meditation rather than it being me? So if there's nothing physical, which is the me meditating, can this me be found anywhere else, perhaps in the mind? So check, are any of the thoughts, emotions, concepts in the mind the me who is meditating? Or are these thoughts, emotions, and concepts things which I, the meditator, create and possess? Maybe the mind itself is the me meditating. Or is the mind simply something which I, the meditator, possess and use for the meditation? Something which I'm trying to train? We do say, my mind. Is the me meditation the collection of body and mind then? Or are the body and mind together something which I possess and I'm trying to use in combination? And yet, other than the body and mind, what else is there? Is the me meditating somewhere else other than body and mind? How can that be? How would I experience that? And if there's nothing more than body and mind, then where is the me meditating? Who possesses and is training this body and mind? If you can't find this me meditating, simply rest in that experience of not finding. But even if you didn't find me meditating, isn't there someone who is having that experience of not finding? So there is a me meditating, sitting here, trying to do this meditation. But just because there is a me meditating, it doesn't mean that the meditator is something solid and self-existent. The me meditating is empty of existing in that way. The meditator is empty of inherent existence. But this does not mean that there is no me at all. Rather than it means that the me meditating exists dependently as something labeled onto the body that is sitting here and the mind that is focusing on the breath. That merely labeled me sitting here meditating. Slowly and gently coming out of the meditation. And I'll move on to the dedication prayer from Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and find repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be free from their ailments. Whatever diseases are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain, to dispel the mysteries of the world.
Okay, thank you, everybody. And we'll take like a 5-minute break, and then we'll start again with some questions and answers. And Felipe will tell you how to do that. I think you're going to raise your hand, so you won't have to type out your question.
Yes, we'll do that. We have a couple of questions still from the session. I'll now give priority to those, but the rest you can start raising your hand by going into the participant section. So
Okay.
now take a break, and then we'll start again in 5 minutes.
All right.
Thank you. So everyone who wants to ask questions during this Q&A session, please go to the participants area in your app or in your device, and there should be a raise hand button. So we'll go in the order of people who raise their hands. Please do it like that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
I'll start by unmuting Amit, so
Yeah.
you can now ask your question.
Good morning, Venerable Drolma. I hope you can hear me fine. Can you hear me okay, Drolma?
You're breaking in and you're going in and out, but I can hear you.
Okay, okay, thank you. It's a long one, so I have written it down. I'm going to read it out.
Okay.
Um, I believe love comes from inside and attachment arises in you from outside as it is driven strongly by the perception. We all are in relationships that have combination of love and attachment. These could be with your children, your siblings, your parents, your friends, a close friend you love, and many times you land up in a situation where these individuals that you deeply care for don't respond as you would like them to due to their nature of being non-communicative or being very private, or there could be psychological issues with them, or these could be, avoidant personalities, as they say in psychology. Then how do you draw the balance of caregiving out of love and letting it go? How do you influence them to do the right thing or let them be? This could become very frustrating life situation at times. And the love vis-a-vis attachment debate can really bog you down during those moments. Is it natural to have such emotional states for a very long period? Your advice on tackling these situations in a manner where your love and care that we have for them prevails and is acknowledged by them. I hope
Okay.
it came across to you completely and I didn't miss out because of the bad signal issue.
I think it is natural to have these emotions. I think that's very true. That we have this wish, because we often wish our loved ones to be happy. And in some cases, we know better than they do. Because we're not them, right? Because we're not in their situation, we don't have their minds, we don't have their, their thoughts and their ideas. Sometimes we can see things more clearly. But the fact is that we can't control anyone. There's no such thing as doing that. I mean, even if we were to lock someone up, we couldn't control their minds, right? So so then I think that remembering that we can't control others helps us to let go and let be a little more. Just remembering that even if I wanted to, right? Even if I wanted to make you act or think in a certain way, I can't do that directly, right? I can't do that directly. And so then my expectations of you become much more general, in the sense that I want you to be happy. Okay, so I can have an expectation that you are happy. Okay, now how you are happy, in what way you express your happiness, or how you figure out you are happy, is going to be up to you, because I can't control it. So if we focus on that perspective of wanting the other person to be happy in any way that they can figure out, I think then it becomes easier to let go of our ideas of how they should be. Now, that said, when there are children, and they're young children, not necessarily once they become adults, we, and even with aging parents, sometimes this can happen too. But there may be a certain amount of wisdom that we have to bring in when we are practicing our loving kindness and compassion, like this idea of tough love, in the sense that, if I really love you and I want you to be happy, and I know that by me giving you anything that you want, that isn't going to really make you happy, because then as an adult, you're going to think that the world gives you everything that you want without having to work for it. And that's not a very compassionate thing to do for someone, to treat them like they don't have, that cause and effect doesn't exist, in that sense. So we can use our wisdom, and we can use our skillful means when we are interacting with others and we want them to be happy. So you're right. Love and attachment happen in most relationships, but if we can start to let go of some of the specific expectations and be more general in I want you to be happy, and communicate that. Sometimes all our loved ones hear is our expectations of them, and they don't hear the part about I want you to be happy. And that's their basis, because they want to be happy too, right? And that can be our basis of our relationship, is that we both want both of us to be happy. And that provides a way in which we can start to communicate about the specifics. Because oftentimes we go right to what we think they should do to be happy, instead of remembering the basis of I want you to be happy, because they don't necessarily hear it. All they hear is you want me to do something that I don't necessarily want to do. Okay.
Yeah, but in relationship, you have responsibilities as well, and sometimes people, sometimes it is natural for you to expect some shouldering of responsibilities as a part of relationship. And
Yes.
so I guess it becomes a balance between let it go, let it be only my responsibility, and let the other person be happy, let her be not cognizant of responsibilities for the time being, and letting go but holding on to relationship, um,
Yeah.
because we are all taught to be interdependent in the worlds of psychology, of togetherness, of staying in love, shouldering responsibilities together. I guess in these natural times where we end up expecting, and it is natural to be difficult to let it go, may lead you into this cyclical discussion of, is this attachment, is this love, is this reminding the person of responsibility? No, this is letting go. This should be let go situation. No, there should be a reminding situation for the person to shoulder responsibility. Or no, let
Yeah.
it be love. Am I able to communicate what the emotional state that we end up going through in the practical
Yes.
normal world of living together,
Yes, I
having
think
a
so.
relationship with a person who doesn't belong to your family yet? And these are mostly relationship of care and love and other things.
Yeah. So you want them to take some responsibility in the home or in their lives, and they don't necessarily see that as being important, and
Yeah,
you have this expectation that they should.
yeah,
Because I mean, if you were to consistently take all the responsibility, then when you're gone, they would never learn. They would
yeah,
never have learned to take responsibility.
yeah,
So sometimes it's a compassionate thing for you to stop taking responsibility for them and let them shoulder it. Sometimes you allow natural consequences to happen to people who don't take responsibility. We have to be kind enough to let them go through making their own mistakes.
yeah. Which means you have to be ready to even take care of them in a better way, because you probably have a foresight that the situation is likely to cause a failure, which means you need to be more ready, time wise, energy wise, and other bandwidth wise, to better take care of them, because you can anticipate it's going to be hurtful for them and
Yeah.
hurtful for you in return, which hurts you more. So now how do we prevent? Again, out of
Yeah.
love and attachment, you will
Yeah.
try to prevent that. So
Eventually they learn. You have hope that when they go through the suffering, they will learn, and you won't experience that suffering forever. You have to have hope in their ability that when you let them take responsibility, that they can handle it, and you won't suffer forever.
thank you.
Next question.
Okay, I'm moving on to Trisha. So you can ask your question.
Good morning, Venerable. Hi.
Hi.
So I think I had the question from the session today. And I also had another question, which I would like to,
Okay,
but I'll try to keep it short.
no problem.
So regarding the question on the session that we had today, since the self is a dependent arising, which is dependent on so many circumstances around us, but at the same time we want to have goals and aspirations for our future, and these goals and aspirations come from some understanding of yourself, or like a personality, like I want to be a lawyer because of me believing that I'm XYZ or I'm good at these things. So how do we draw that distinction between this dependent arising or this constantly changing person versus having aspirations and goals, or like how much? I guess it boils down to how much free will or control do we have of our future.
Okay. How much control do we have of our future? So the self is a dependent arising, and at the same time the self exists. Okay, so we do have certain abilities, we do have certain aspirations, and these are all part of ourself. So we can continue to have goals and aspirations. It's just that we, when those don't necessarily happen for us, we don't get so so upset and so put ourselves down because somehow we're not who we think we should be, right? So yeah, it is this balance. I didn't get the second one. How?
Yeah, I think that's about it, because I think a lot of our choices and our decisions are shaped by our personality, or what we believe is our personality. But then,
Right.
I mean, I guess it's also shaped by many other circumstances that make our personality. So I just wanted to know how to draw that distinction.
Yeah, and I think it really, you operate on what you know and what you can do and knowing yourself, until you come up against some resistance of like, now I can't do this, and now this isn't working out the way I wanted to. And then what do you do with that resistance? That's, how can you be flexible and, well, but I'm also other things, and I also have other aspirations and other goals and like this. So it's like an opening up and a flexibility.
Right.
Okay.
If I can ask you the question that's not in
Sure.
the presentation.
Sure.
So I think this is something that I often struggle with when it comes to, say, loving kindness, where I'm unable to separate the idea of loving kindness with how I feel emotionally. So I'm often questioning if my feeling of loving kindness is genuine, because I mean, I don't feel lit up, and like I don't feel this feeling of warmth and loving kindness every time I think of, I want good for someone else, or I want good for others. And this is especially true when I think of loving kindness towards all of humanity, in the sense of every time I think about, do I care enough? Do I care about the world enough? And do I feel this? Do I have this feeling of like loving kindness for the entire world? I start questioning my feeling of love, and then I go into this spiral of anxiety where I feel that I'm not capable of feeling love for the world on a whole. So I just
Well, first of all, I think if you could have a warm heart for the whole world, you would be amazing, right? You would be a bodhisattva. You would be very close to being enlightened. And so most of us are not there. So just sort of like, so you're not like a bad person because you can't feel that yet. That actually becomes something that we aspire to, something that we want to generate. And then this sense of lit up, I wonder about, I use my teacher as an example, and I know, and Lama Zopa too. They have much more love for the whole world than I do. And yet they aren't necessarily excited by it, right? They have this warmth and this, and I don't even know what their internal experience is, but what I can see, what it appears to me to be, is that it's like they're so accepting and so loving and so accepting of that feeling of warmth that it doesn't become somehow an extraordinary experience. It's just simply the way things are. So they don't necessarily feel lit up, but at the same time, it's there. They have the wish for the other people to be happy, and everyone that comes into their life, they wish to be happy, but they don't necessarily have an overwhelming emotional experience of it every time. So that's, yeah, and I think it's possible, you know, to develop that warmth and love for others, and not necessarily be some kind of excitation or something like that. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, it's just a comment, but I'll keep it very short. But say, I mean, one side of love is also not doing harm. So when you're not doing harm, you know that it's coming from wanting to be kind.
Mhm.
But I also get bogged up in this thing of how can I do more, or how can I positively love someone by doing something. And that's when I don't know how to, I don't know how to draw that distinction between just being there and taking it as it comes, and versus being like, yes, today I want to do 10 things which will, make others happy.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, yeah, that helps. I mean, to not feel overexcited by this
Yeah.
idea of love.
Yeah, that what you're doing is enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank
Uh-huh.
you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Okay, I'll move on to Sandeep. I'm going to unmute you now.
Good morning, Drolma.
Hello.
Hi. I have a question around today's session only. So we talked a lot about self today. So I have a question, that is the self we are talking about is our ego? Because since the childhood we have always learned that one should not have ego and all. But I was reading a book a couple of years back around success, and there one of the writers said that one should be fiercely protective of our ego. We should not let anyone hurt our ego or belittle us or something. And when we were talking about self today, I was when we're trying to identify what is that self, I felt somewhere it is at the end our ego, how we perceive ourselves, in
Yeah.
whatever way. So that's a question, like, are we, the ego, is the ego our real self?
Okay. So when you use the term ego, you're usually coming from a Western psychology point of view. And sometimes it's used in Buddhism and sometimes it's not. And I don't like to use it because I feel like we can have a healthy self, which is similar to the sense of a healthy ego in Western psychology. But unfortunately, Western psychology stops there. They don't take it into, they make the ego, a healthy ego, into something that is concrete, self-existent, an end in itself, right? And when we're talking Buddhism, we're actually seeing another aspect of the self that is not necessarily the ego. And then in popular psychology or in popular language, you can talk about people who have a big ego, who think they're better than everybody else. And this would be more the sense of Buddhism, the self that doesn't exist. Okay, the self that somehow is in control all the time, that is better than everybody else, that exists separate from all our circumstances, all our experiences that have ever gone into making up who we are, and all of our connections. So in Western psychology, they talk about relationships, but they can't have this this sense of a self that is so interdependent and interconnected with others that it even starts to disappear. A self that starts to disappear within relationship to others. And again, it is how we exist. It is a reflection of our reality, but it sometimes, yeah, there's no room for it in Western psychology. And yet when we start to get in touch with that, we become so much bigger than just a me. And that is, I think, a powerful way to counteract this sense of loneliness, this sense of I have to do it all, this sense of self-importance, and recognizing that and seeing that. And yeah, in Western psychology, ego wouldn't fit anywhere in there, So that's just, yeah, it's not a very coherent way, but it's sort of talking around this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, moving on to Roshni. You can ask.
Good morning, Venerable Drolma.
Hello.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
And this is, let me give you the situation which gave a rise to this question. I heard from a couple of people who are trustworthy about how nomadic communities as well as tribal communities. So I work among the tribal communities. So how the tribal communities and the nomadic communities who depend on daily wage labor, how because of the social distancing and stay at home, the lockdown, they've been badly affected. And the government had said that they would deliver food packets or food grains to them. But I heard from them how they were being cheated out of it. And the injustice. So when I heard about the injustice of, the powerful coming, so the truck would come, but they would only deliver to people who had the Aadhaar card, which was few. And even from them, after the truck left, the political party people came and they would take a couple of packets from them and move out. That was injustice. And when I heard that, I became extremely disturbed. And then I asked myself this question. I said, this is my mind perceiving it as injustice. And that, so this was to calm my own mind, that I said, it's not, it's like, it's my mind that is perceiving it as injustice. But then I asked, so am I now making an excuse to not act because I am saying that it's my mind and I need to control my mind, to not be disturbed about the injustice, number one. And being disturbed about that whole situation, does it not point to the fact that I want to control the outcomes, which I cannot? So the helplessness. Right. So I'm also disturbed by the helplessness of my own situation. That's my first question. Would you like to?
Yeah, let me do that one first. Yeah. So when we label something injustice, simply because we're labeling it, it's okay. I mean, I label this a cup and it is a cup, right? So I label something injustice and it is injustice, right? I mean, maybe somebody else doesn't see it that way, but I think in general, the way you've described it, that it is injustice, that the people aren't getting what they need. So that's okay. The labeling is okay. This is what it is, right? And the fact that it disturbs you is because you have compassion, right? You don't want people to be hungry. You wish that they were fed, right? When I hear it from you, I feel like it's injustice, and I have compassion too. I also see that, have compassion for the people who are doing it, right? How misguided they are, how they believe that somehow it's going to make them happy to steal from others, from what others should have. Okay. So definitely, you know, huge compassion for the whole situation. Okay. And helplessness, right? I can't go out there and change it, right? I don't have any ability to, you know, make those people be what they are. Maybe, you know, maybe I can try to elect leaders who I consider will stop this corruption. You know, maybe in my voting system or in my political system, you know, I can have an effect, but it isn't very huge, you know, and it's not immediate, right? And so then is it helpful for me to be disturbed about that? Does it really help the situation for me to be upset or for me to be angry? You know, that's, and or does it help the situation for me to feel helpless? Right? I do, and it comes up, but for me to continue it, to perpetuate it, does that really help the situation? The situation is exactly the same. Whether I'm upset about it or not, the situation is the same. I ultimately, and this is hard for me too, I have to accept that I can't control that. And and I don't know that it's an excuse, because I really, even if I use my wisdom, and even if I use, you know, everything within my power, can I really change that situation, right? Even if I went out there and walked up to the truck, you know, and said, stop it, right? And can I even do that? Can I even get to that truck, right? You know, no, I can't. And that's, unfortunately, it's accepting it. It's accepting that I can't. And sometimes my sense of self is that I have more power than I actually have. And that's why I feel helpless, is because I really think I should be able to change this. And that's absurd, right? We don't exist that way.
But Venerable Drolma, there are times I feel that we sometimes push ourselves to do certain things because we feel strongly about it. So, for example, I may not be able to go and stop the truck, but I feel that maybe because of that disturbance, that might push me to start writing about it.
Okay. Well, then there's something you can do about it, right? You can write about it. You can tell people about it. You can, you know, have your voice be heard and influence the world in that way. So then why would you be upset, right? Then you can do something and you do it.
Yeah, but it still doesn't change.
No, it doesn't change. Maybe eventually it'll change the situation, right? You're writing. Maybe eventually it'll change the situation. So what I'm talking about is Shanti Davis. If you can't change the situation, why worry about it? You can't do anything about it. If you can change the situation, why worry about it? Do what you need to do. Okay? So then where is the, you know, how does the worry help? How does the, you know, meditating on helplessness help us? Right? Meditating in the sense of perpetuating it, making yourself feel more. And if you feel compassion, good. Meditate on compassion. Develop your, you know, do Tonglen, right? Wishing to remove the suffering from those people, giving your love. Okay. And that makes you a more compassionate and loving person in the world. And that affects the world. That becomes positive. Okay.
Can I ask my second question?
Yeah, we still have some time. Go ahead. Try to make it, short so we can get to others.
So this is about renunciation.
Okay.
I don't remember that slide so clearly, where renunciation was suggested as the solution for getting out of attachment to materialism.
Okay.
But then the question I have is, when a householder renounces her ordinary life, doesn't that amount to irresponsibility, since she has her dharma of being a householder and raising her family.
Okay. So when we're talking about renunciation, we aren't necessarily talking about giving everything up, giving everything away. Because yes, you have a responsibility like to your family and your children and yourself to have your basic needs met, okay? So renunciation is more about our relationship to those material things, whether we have them or not, okay? And our relationship to those material things can be one of miserliness, of never giving away. It can be one of greed, of like, I have to have, I have to have, I have to have, I have to have, even beyond what you and your family actually need. Then it becomes a different relationship to those material things versus I earn what I need. I maintain what I need. I maintain what I need for my family. And then I am generous when I can be. I give away what is extra and I am willing to share. So that's a different relationship to those material things. It isn't about necessarily giving everything away. Because you're right, that would be irresponsible.
But what about renouncing the attachment to relations?
Okay. So when we're talking about relationships, okay, and attachment, we're talking about this belief that they are the ultimate source of our happiness, okay, and that we want to hold on to them in exactly the same way, okay. We can have connection in relationships. I can be connected to my family and I can want them to be happy, but I can also recognize that once they're gone, I'll still be happy. So then I don't have to keep them being a certain way or keep them here. So it's a difference. Yeah. Connection, love, different from attachment.
It's basically like a distancing.
Emotionally, not necessarily physically. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In my mind. And yet I do find that like with my father who's getting ready to pass away, I have such incredible love for him and incredible connection to him at the same time that I am very aware he's going to be gone soon. So the distancing in some ways, it brings me closer. If I, like I love him and I love my interactions with him and I'm so happy when I can be with him at the same time that I know he's going to be gone. So I don't know that emotionally I'm necessarily like indifferent, like that's not happening.
No. Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Next one.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Niv, who had a question. So Niv, you can.
Hello.
Hello, Niv.
Hello. Thank you very much for these teachings, for offering them. My question is like a little bit unrelated to what we've been talking about. I'm sorry, but you mentioned you studied at Maitripa College.
Yes.
And I was wondering what you studied and what, whom you would suggest those kinds of like higher studies in Buddhism to.
So, well, Maitripa College, so it has two programs. One program is more of an academic program for people who want to go into like university or college settings to teach Buddhism or do research. And so I studied the Slam Rim in depth. I studied the Tibetan language. I studied then this Madhyamaka, this emptiness philosophy. I studied, and then I also studied like research methodologies. I studied the history of Buddhism. I studied some of the more traditional mind and mental factors and something called a specific text, the Uttara Tantra. But they also have a program that is a chaplaincy program, which is if you're interested in a career of serving other people from a spiritual perspective, it has those same aspects. I don't think the Tibetan language is in there as a requirement, or it's much more limited. But the track is about serving as like a chaplain, like in hospitals and in prisons and in counseling centers, as a spiritual advisor. And that's a 3-year program. And if you're looking for a career in which you can bring, you know, Buddhism to the world in a service capacity, then that would be like the track for you. And like I said, it's 3 years, and it involves more of like community service and leadership. And they have a website, and you can go on their website and you can request to talk to the people. There's Namdrol is one woman, and Lee is another woman, and they can tell you about how to, you know, the whole program and how it works, and yeah, the kind of support. They have scholarships, and they also have international student visas that you can go there on, and they can talk to you about Portland, the city of Portland, which is a really nice place to live. So, yeah. Did that help? Oh, she's muted.
She's muted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me
Okay.
enter again.
Yes, sorry. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Okay, good.
Okay, now I move on to Hugo.
Hi, thank you for the course. So there are actually 2 of us here. So we have 2 questions.
Okay.
My question is about the nature of the mind in Buddhism, because I've been studying yoga, and we make the distinction between the great mind, which includes the ego, the intellect, the memory, and the small mind, which is more the thoughts. And so what is the point of view of Buddhism on this?
Okay. We don't really make that distinction. It's all the mind. Okay. And all those things that you talked about are all aspects of the mind.
Okay, so when we're in a state of pure awareness in meditation, for example, it's also the mind that is showing this?
Yes. So you have the ability of the mind to be able to observe itself. And this part of itself that you are observing in pure awareness is its nature of being able to be aware.
Okay.
So you have, yeah, you have two aspects, don't you? You have the mind that is aware, and then you have the mind that is able to be aware of being aware.
Okay.
Yeah, but we make it all the mind. Yeah, we don't talk about it being, I know in some Hindu traditions, there is the observing mind is somehow separate from our own minds, and that we don't have that. That's, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Right. Uh-huh.
Thank you, George, for the second question.
Yes. Hi, George.
Hi, Venerable. So I'd like to continue with, I think, 2 or 3 questions before. You were talking about the Maitreya College, and I'd like to ask from the perspective of if someone was seriously considering to enter into the monastic tradition, particularly with the FPMT, what further movements on from this would you advise, aside to we're being in lockdown with the COVID-19?
Yeah. So ordination, considering ordination, you know, one of the things that I did that was really amazing is in the US, there is Sravasti Abbey. Have you heard of them? Sravasti Abbey?
No.
So it's with Venerable Thupten Chodron, and she has a summer program that is about 3.5 weeks long, and it's called Exploring Monasticism. So it's a program in which you go and live in a monastic community. So it's an abbey with other monks and nuns, mostly nuns, but there is a monk there now. But you go with other people who are considering taking on their ordination, you know, becoming ordained. And she takes you through discussions about explorations about what you anticipate your lifestyle will be like. Okay. Yeah. Felipe put up the link there. But it's very good for, because when you, either with the FPMT usually, or when you request ordination with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, they have you go through a long questionnaire of exploring your intentions and how you will support yourself, what you imagine it will be like without a partner. Or for guys, you know, we talk about things like wearing a dress, you know, that you get to do, and shaving your head. You know, for women, it's more about shaving their heads. You know, anticipating that. What will your family think? You know, how you know, all these questions that are really good to look at and explore before you become ordained. You know. And then yeah, what you think your life will be like, how you'll make it happen. Unfortunately, because for us Westerners, there isn't this built-in structure of monasteries that support us. There are not very many of them. Okay, monasteries that support us. So when you come as a Himalayan monk or a Himalayan nun, there are already like Kopan Monastery, or you know, these places that will support you to be a monastic, and that's traditionally how it's been done. But in the West, we have to find places that will do that for us. So it becomes a little bit more of a hurdle to become ordained in the West, because we have to think about this, right? Now, Dharma centers often want monastics, but they can't always support them very well. So you have to look into that. Yeah. Sravasti Abbey is about one of the only places that I know of. There's some support available through FPMT once you become ordained. And yeah, so, but you have to anticipate that it isn't true like it is, you know, in Thailand or Burma. You know, most people who become ordained in those traditions are automatically supported when they join a monastery or a nunnery, and that's not the case for Westerners.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So look more at the FPMT website.
Yeah, and Sravasti, and look into Sravasti. Yeah, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Did that answer what you were looking for? I don't even know. I just went into my spiel.
Yeah. I feel I need to. I'm English. I mean, I'm locked down in Goa, India at the moment. But
Oh,
it
wow.
gives me. I'll look more into it from an English or European perspective.
Yeah.
But it does give me some insights. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, the Sravasti website too has a lot of resources if you're considering becoming a monk or nun. So reading and writing your own ideas both is really good. That exploration, you can do that now.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to Fernando. Fernando.
Yes, my question is in relation to the Lamrim in the first volume on the 6 types of suffering. Recently, I heard from Geshe Dawa that he was explaining about the celestial objects, I mean, sun and the moon, and then he mentioned that in some texts, it's mentioned that those are also considered sentient beings. Do you know, or have you ever heard about this, and in which text I can read about this?
Yeah.
Type of
Yeah, no, sorry. I don't know where you would find that.
But you have heard about it?
In a Zen, from a Zen perspective, I have heard that trees and rocks are sentient. But within the Tibetan tradition, I have not heard about
No?
that. Yeah.
Because in the Lamrim, it's mentioned, even if you're born as a deity of the sun and the moon, and then it's where in Geshe Dawa, which studied in the Tibetan tradition, mentioned that in some specific texts, it's mentioned that they're considered sentient beings also.
Yeah, maybe like one of my friends was talking about before, that there are deities who are, you know, conscious, who then go into the sun or the moon. You know, like they're already deities who are, you know, who have been in, you know, manifested in other ways as well. You know, they've been human, they've been animal, they've been this, and that maybe becoming the sun or the moon is an option.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So in that sense, it would be a consciousness entering into, yeah, like a tree or something like that. But it wouldn't be the tree itself. Yeah, it's interesting. interesting to consider.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I have another question, but maybe later if there's like time.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
you. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll move on then to Inderjit. You can now ask your question.
Good morning, Venerable Drolma. Good morning.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you so much for everything you are offering. I'm really indebted to you. Yeah, so my question is related to one, I wish to know more about the emptiness. So, can I apply this concept when I'm in, say, analytical meditation to on myself itself? Sometimes I have felt that I am also nothing. Like I lose this feeling also that there is. So is it that emptiness is there for like? I mean, I have a body. I can say that I have a body. I have feeling. I have a history. And at times I feel, oh no, it is nothing. And when I think, sometimes tears burst in my eyes. I feel that. And I mean, there is some kind of very vast, I can't explain that feeling which comes, or the way I feel that time. I can't explain that. It comes naturally, but it comes at times. And this is, at times I feel, is it empty? I mean, emptiness means there's nothing I am. Or and another thing I wish to know about. I read somewhere the concept of the pain bodies uh, in this Yoga Nidra, and no, not Yoga Nidra, that dreams yoga. So I read about these pain bodies. So I wish to know more about these two concepts, or if you can refer me some books or some courses which I can do on this and read about this. I know these are very vast things to be just handled in
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah. So let's start with the first one. Sometimes when we have strong feelings in our meditation on emptiness of the self, it's because we are recognizing that the self that we always thought existed doesn't. Okay? Which, now, we have to be careful because although we get a strong experience when we start to, and even some fear, like I don't exist, right? Like there's no me. We have to recognize that seeing the emptiness of something is not the same of it as its non-existence. Okay, so just like the cup, in order to see the emptiness of the cup has to exist. Okay, so it's the same with the self. The self has to exist in order to even start searching for its emptiness. And remember that it's emptiness of appearing, of existing in the way that it appears. So it still exists. It's just that it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. Now, because we have, we have gone, for a long time with this sense of self that is somehow concrete and somehow absolute, then when we start to even chip away at that, when we start to even, when we start looking for it, like in the meditation, and you can't find it, all of a sudden it's not there. You have to remember that what's not there is not yourself, but this idea of a self that is somehow absolute and somehow strong. So having a reaction like that can actually be really positive, because you're starting to see that what you believed for so long was the way that you existed doesn't, right? And like my teacher, he was here we were talking about the experience of when you first, get this experience of emptiness. And we were talking about the mudra of it. And he was like, the mudra was like this. You know, like, oh my, it was great. Because everything we thought, the way things were, now we start to realize they aren't that way. And oh my gosh, how could I ever have thought they were this way before, you know? And so this is also this experience of this self. I always thought it was this way. And sometimes, like Lama Tsongkhapa talks about, when he was teaching emptiness, and one of his disciples all of a sudden went like this, you know, like, like, maybe I'm not here, you know, like, maybe, you know, where am I, right? And that's a very positive experience, because it starts to break up this, you know, it starts, you know, the crack in existence where the light comes through. And then the other thing, I have never heard of the concept of pain bodies, so I wouldn't know where to refer you to. There are some good books on dream yoga. I would recommend looking up dream yoga for Alan Wallace. That he makes it pretty understandable, and maybe you can check with you know, look for that concept there under his books on dream yoga. Maybe you can find that pain bodies thing.
The name of the book is Dreaming Yourself Awake.
Okay, dreaming yourself awake.
Yeah. Okay, there were 2 more hands raised, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's do those 2 and then we'll stop. So we'll go over a little bit, but just those 2 people who have been waiting.
Okay, so let's go to Paul first. Paul,
Okay.
go ahead.
Hi, Venerable Drolma. I'll make it quick. I'm in recovery from substance abuse. Buddhism is a large part of why I was able to become sober. And now that I am, it's great. You know, my practice has really blossomed in a way that's wonderful. I've realized that there's a lot of, you know, connection and identification with my past actions surrounding my drug and alcohol abuse. So I've started doing purification practice, which is really helping me. But I was wondering if you had any other suggestions for practices I could be doing to supplement that, or any recommended literature. Yeah.
So there's I've heard of two authors who combine Buddhism and 12-step programs, and one of them is One Breath at a Time. And
Okay.
yeah, I did a retreat with the author of that one, and I can't remember the other one. But I remember this One Breath at a Time was a really great, a really great combination of these 2 things. And I really enjoyed doing that retreat with him. Connection to past actions, other things we can do. Yeah, I think sometimes when we have these memories of negative things that we've done, ways that we've harmed people, ways that we've harmed ourselves, one thing that I've worked on is that I have done Tonglen for a lot of my past selves. So when I was when I wasn't getting what I needed, and that's why I was using, then I give that self what I needed and heal myself in that way. So then I don't carry this, because sometimes we can really carry this sense of a self that is not okay, that doesn't deserve to be happy, or somehow is like a bad person because of all the harmful actions we remember doing under the influence. And so, yeah, starting to work with some of those selves and heal some of those selves so that we can free. And then, of course, any kind of, like we did today, you know, what is that self? And that self is so much more than just our past actions.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome.
Okay, and now we move on to Lucia.
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you for doing this. It's been such a pleasure to listen to you and to hear everyone. It's really nice, especially if you're in your house the whole day.
Yes. Where are you? Where are you? What country?
We're in the U.S. in New
Oh,
Mexico.
okay. Cool. In Santa Fe, Taos, Albuquerque?
In Las Cruces.
Oh, Las Cruces. Nice. Nice. Oh, okay. I lived in Santa Fe for a long time, so that's why I was asking.
Oh, wow. Okay. So my question has to do with prayer and how when we're doing prayer, or we're chanting mantras, or where does it go? How does it go to something? Does it only affect yourself, or who are they directed to?
Okay.
And then along those lines, when you do a prayer, what is the difference in this connection when you do it with feeling, or when you do it just like intellectually repeating mantras with feeling and without feeling?
Okay. So from the point of view of karma, okay, when we have a very powerful intention, and this includes a heartfelt wish, they say, which includes like a feeling, right? And we recite prayers, that those have an effect in on the world, and in particular, the closer the people around you, the more that's going to have an effect on them because they're closer. Okay, just like in the physical world, when you do something, when we start going out and out, we start to see that it's like a web, in the sense that we are all interconnected. And so even our aspirations and our heartfelt wishes for good things to happen can have an effect throughout the whole web, right? Like a hologram in some ways. Okay. And so you can have an effect. You tend to have more of an effect on people closer to you. So when you say mantras or prayers just intellectually without this strong intention, they still have an effect, but of course it's going to be lighter, okay, because your thoughts are lighter, not as powerful. Now, the other aspect within Buddhism, and this is specific to Tibetan or Mahayana Buddhism, is this sense that there are enlightened beings who have come before us, right? Like Shakyamuni Buddha is enlightened. We talk about Tara as an enlightened being, Medicine Buddha, Vajrasattva, and these are beings and who still exist in the world and have an effect. So what we're doing through our saying mantras, through bringing them to mind, through asking for their help and their interventions, is that we are creating the causes for them to also be able to have an influence in the world. Okay, now they don't have all powerful, they can't do whatever they want, but we through our prayers create the causes for them to be able to actualize their promises. To, like, for the medicine Buddhas are particularly powerful right now in terms of they had a wish before they became Buddhas. They made a strong wish to be, to help, remove diseases in the world. And so then when we say their mantra, when we pray to them, we create the causes for their wishes to become actualized in the world, to become an influence in the world. So it's both. We aren't personally saying, please help me, and then they personally say, I will help you. It's more of on a cause and effect level rather than a personal kind of level.
Thank you. I've never heard it that way before.
Oh,
Thank
good.
you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm glad you got your microphone fixed. Yeah, because we couldn't talk in our breakout group. Yeah, so I'm glad it's working now. Maybe tomorrow when we do the discussions, you'll be able to talk to someone directly. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And that was the last one, right, Felipe?
That was the last one, Venerable. We're done.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
So please, Yes, did you have something you wanted to say?
No. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes, so please dedicate all your, your contemplations and your learning and thinking and your good heart, and contemplate it, for the quick resolution of this situation all over the world, that the hospitals get everything that they need, that there is a vaccine and a cure found very quickly, and that this pandemic, that it resolves as quickly as possible. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Venerable.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you on Monday.
Yep. See you on Monday. No class Saturday and Sunday. See you, or 2 days off and then start again.